My name is Alondra Reyes. I am the Policy and Partnerships Manager here at the New Mexico Immigrants Law Center, and today I will be conducting a Know Your Rights presentation. Now, to go over the agenda a little bit, today we will be discussing what are my rights, who is ICE, if ICE comes to your home, if ICE is at your workplace, ICE in a public space, and if Border Patrol pulls you over. Now, the number one question we receive is, do I have rights? The answer is yes, you have rights regardless of your immigration status. What are my rights, you might ask? So we have a list of rights here. The first one is you have the right to keep the door closed if ICE comes to your home. You also have the right to remain silent. You have a right to not sign anything, and we strongly advise that you be careful when it comes to signing any sort of documents. Often these are deportation orders. So it's strongly advised that you speak with an attorney before you sign any sort of document from ICE. You have the right to ask if you are free to go. You have the right to not consent to a search. So a search warrant is needed in order to have any sort of search conducted, and you have the right to access health care. Now, who are the people at risk? The people who have deportation orders and are currently present in the U.S. are definitely at risk of being in trouble with ICE. Also, people without lawful immigration status, people who have been arrested or have criminal offenses, and people who have overstayed a visa. Who is ICE? So we're going to talk a little bit about these photos. As you can see on the first photo here, you're going to see the reference of the ICE agency logo. In the second photo, you're going to see a man wearing a police vest. Now, it's important to acknowledge that ICE has in the past sometimes posed as a police officer. So this is why we included this photo, to be cautious with both ICE and police officers in general. This is a photo of a more traditional ICE police uniform. And then lastly, we have the ICE motor vehicle, which it's also important to acknowledge that sometimes the ICE vehicle is in a solid color, whether that's white or black or has no logo. Usually it's an SUV as well. So some warnings to put out there. It is important to remember not to lie to any ICE officer. Do not share information that is not true, and do not present documents that are not valid. This will make the situation much worse and could put somebody in a dangerous position. It is also important to remember not to carry any foreign passports with you. Now, if you do have lawful immigration status and are over the age of 18, the law requires you to carry those documents with you. And if you're asked by an ICE official to show your documents, it's advisable to show these documents, or you may be at risk of detention. So instead of aggravating the situation, if you have those documents on you, show them. Now, how does ICE obtain my information? Previous arrests, typically, they have access to any sorts of fingerprints, booking information, criminal history. They also have access if you have been to jail or prison. They'll have these documents, personal information, along with orders of deportation. If you have a current order of deportation, they do have your information. Social media, it's important to now more than ever be cautious about your social media, and that's including all popular platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Also, USCIS immigration applications. So they do typically have information already if you've submitted some sort of application. Now, what are some of the ICE tactics? So we have seen from previous years that ICE will sometimes wait early in the morning outside of people's homes to kind of learn their routines and understand who is living there. They are also known to knock on the door and yell police with 6 to 8 officers waiting outside. They don't usually say I, so it's important to remember that sometimes when they're knocking on the door, they may pose as somebody else. Sometimes they will try and push their way through the door, especially if the door is open, which is why we need to remember that we have that right to keep the door closed. Sometimes they lie entirely about who they are. For example, we've had instances where ICE has said that they're looking to hire somebody, or they want to discuss the Bible, some sort of religion, or they're looking for a barber, any of the above, any such lies to try to get into the home or get someone to open the door. They may also even be somebody pretending to be local police investigating a case, and sometimes they dress in normal clothes, normal plain clothes. So it's super important to be cautious about who is at your door. They might use unmarked cars to stop vehicles that they think are carrying non-citizens, wear normal clothes, that type of thing. Now, what's going to happen if ICE comes to your homes? Here are some of those suggestions. So if ICE goes to a residency to try to arrest someone, you have a right to, again, not open the door. ICE cannot enter your home unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. And most of the time, ICE does not have judicial warrants. Instead, usually they only have warrants signed by ICE officers, and the warrants signed by ICE officers do not give ICE the authority to enter your home. So, if ICE has a valid warrant, then they are allowed into your home. However, usually they do not have those, and you have to make sure that it's a judicial warrant. You should always ask to see the officer's badge. Another thing to remember here, again, remain silent. Anything you say or do can and will be used against you. So it is important that you remain calm. For example, try your best to relax. Don't yell, don't fight back. Try to remain silent and calm in this situation, knowing that you know what to do in that instant. Also, do not sign anything that ICE gives you. You have the right to not sign any documents without an immigration attorney or a qualified legal representative reviewing it. It's important to remember this, especially if you don't know the language of those documents. Now, what happens if ICE comes to your workplace? ICE is allowed to enter a workplace if that workplace is open to the public, such as a store, a restaurant. They are allowed into these sort of public places. However, they are not permitted to enter the non-public spaces of a workplace. For example, if you're working in a restaurant and ICE comes in, they are not allowed to enter the kitchen or any employee restricted areas without a warrant, once again, or voluntary consent of the employer. So it's important here to remember owners and employers are allowed to deny ICE access to your workplace. Okay, if ICE enters your workplace, you have the right to remain silent. Once again, remember anything you say, do, will be used against you, and you have the right to not answer any questions that give immigration authorities a reason to believe you're in violation of immigration law. This includes not sharing your nationality, your status, how or when you entered the US. Now, you can also ask if you are free to go. So if ICE states that you are free to go, you can say, I do not want to answer any questions. I do not wish to speak with you, and calmly walk away. Remember, it is super important to breathe through the situation and really stay as calm as we can to avoid provoking any sort of aggression. Now, lastly, you also have the right to not consent to any sort of search. So, ICE generally cannot search you without your consent unless you have a specific reason to believe you have committed a crime. Okay, you have the right to say, I do not consent to this search. Saying this may make it less likely that ICE will go through the search. Again, they also need some sort of warrant. So it's important to remember that without a judicial warrant, they cannot conduct any sort of searches. What happens if ICE approaches you in a public space? Now, once again, we're going to go over the same rights, just in different situations. That first one being remain silent. So remember, do not say anything, do not do anything that will be used against you, and do not answer any questions. Whatever personal questions they may ask you, refrain from answering any and all questions. Ask them once again if you are free to go. And if ICE states that you're free to go, then you can calmly walk away. If ICE states that you are not free to go, Ask, am I being detained? If they say no, then repeat, I do not want to answer your questions and I do not wish to speak with you, and slowly, calmly walk away. However, if I state you are being detained, you can state, I want to exercise my right to remain silent and I wish to speak with an immigration attorney. Okay. And once again, remembering the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution protects people from any sort of unreasonable searches and seizures. One thing this means is that ICE generally cannot search you again without this consent that you can give. So avoid giving that consent, and also without the warrant. So again, I do not consent to this search is something that you can say in this scenario. And saying this is likely going to avoid ICE from conducting any sort of search. Now, if Border Patrol pulls your vehicle over, some important things to remember here are that southern areas of New Mexico are within that 100 miles of the border with Mexico, and it's often referred to as the 100-mile zone. In this area, Customs and Border Protection, CBP, and their subunit, Border Patrol, are authorized to pull vehicles over and erect immigration checkpoints. Now, Border Patrol is authorized to pull vehicles over if they have reasonable suspicion of an immigration violation or crime, and they may ask you or others in the vehicle questions about immigration status. In this instance, if you are pulled over by Border Patrol, you have the right to, once again, remain silent. Remember, anything you say will be used against you, and you have the right not to answer any of these questions. So, this includes not sharing your personal information as we've discussed in the past. Now, another thing, ask if you are free to go. Ask CBP. So if CBP states you are free to go, you can state, I do not wish to answer further questions or speak with you, and you can leave. Again, CBP generally cannot search you without your consent unless you decide to give them that consent or they have a judicial warrant. And you can again state, I do not wish to consent this search. How to prepare further, practice what you will say if you have an interaction with ICE. It's always good to just calmly have those types of reactions prepared before encountering these situations. Have resources, information handy, for example, the phone number of an attorney you're working with, numbers of family members. Know your A number. It is super important that you know your immigration A number, as that is a way that you will be identified and can present your current immigration status to officials. Keep all your documents in a safe place. So make sure you have your documents secured and ready to be accessed if needed. Make a plan for the safety of you, your family, your children, in the event that you are detained. So worst case scenario, you want to be able to have a plan for the rest of your family members just in case the worst case scenario does occur. And here we have a link to access more Know Your Rights materials. If you have any further questions, you could always reach back out to the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center. Thank you so much.